Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of Hoxhunt, all things human risk management. I'm excited because this is exciting music happening in the background behind me. It really kind of gets the juices flowing. I always want to dance when I start hearing that music. With us today, coming off of a very interesting conference that he'll tell us a little bit about, is Maxime Cartier. And before we say hello to Maxime, just wanted to introduce this concept that we will be talking about today. Completion. 100% completion. It looks good in a report. It checks the box for compliance, but does it actually reduce risk? Security leaders are starting to push back. They're calling completion rates cosmetic, misleading, and more about optics than outcomes. In today's episode, we are unpacking the real question. If completion doesn't prove anything, what does? Joining us, fresh off of this conference he will tell you all about, is Maxime Cartier, Head of Human Risk at Hoxhunt. Hello, Maxime.
Hi, Eliot. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Maxime, tell us again. So where were you recently and who were you talking to?
So I'm in the US, actually. I'm in our Minneapolis office, actually. But I just came back from the Sounds Security Awareness Summit that was in Chicago last week, so this August. And it's a fantastic conference. Like, it's the biggest security awareness conference that I know of, at least, but I'm quite sure it's the biggest one. And it's a great opportunity to meet with fellow security awareness, behavior culture practitioners from all over the world. It's a lot of people from the US, but there are people from all over the world joining this conference. So I had a great time.
Well, fantastic. And I don't know how many of those conversations you had involved completion rates, but I'm sure that having had so many conversations as you did, that perhaps you had some very relevant and timely insights into the topic at hand. So let's start off with a question here. Security teams often tell us nothing's changing despite running regular training. Why is that such a common story?
Because training is information, it's not behavior change. And you've heard this before, that knowing is very different from doing, right? Telling people to do something is not enough to get them to do it. There's this example that I like to use. So I know that broccoli is healthy, right? It's a great superfood that is supposed to help your body in a lot of different ways, right? And I know it, right? I've heard it from many times from many people, online resources, and still I don't really eat broccoli, or not as often as I should, at least, right? Because I just don't like it that much. And it's something that is very common. I mean, there's been decades of awareness campaign about smoking, for example. And yes, sure, smoking has decreased from its peak, but there are still people smoking out there, right? Even though there's been decades of public awareness campaign about it. It's the same for many different areas. Information doesn't necessarily lead to action.
Very true. People still smoke. People still skip their broccoli. When a team hits a compliance milestone, but still experiences incidents, what does that reveal about their current metrics?
Yes, so what we see is that a lot of organizations want to get to this 100% compliance, right? And it's important to measure compliance, right? I mean, you want to be compliant, you need to get this 100% or as close as possible to 100% completion rate. But what this measure, it's an input. It's measuring if people took the training, right? What they did in terms of training rather than outcomes. After the training, did they change anything about their behaviors? And it's like celebrating the gym memberships that are being sold without checking whether anyone actually got healthier or is actually even going to the gym anymore after buying the subscription.
That's a great metaphor. I love that. Yeah, if someone just keeps on going to the gym and just sort of sitting there smoking and not eating broccoli, what's going to happen? Where does the obsession with completion rates actually come from? Is it executive pressure, audit requirements, or just habit?
Yeah, I mean, first thing is what I just said, that there are compliance requirements. There's standards and frameworks and regulations that do say that you need to train your employees, your workforce regularly, right? So we want to satisfy these requirements, and this is one of the reasons that we have this obsession with completion rates. But I don't think that's the only one. I think also what happens is that it became one of the main metric only because it's easy, or mostly because it's easy, right? It's easy to get that number. You just download the report from your LMS, from your security awareness vendor, and yeah, you got the number. You can say we have 90, 95, 99% completion rate. And not only is it easy to get, but the executives who want some report about your program, they also might want a single simple number that you report on, right? Not a very complex picture of everything that you're doing, but one number that shows them what's the health of the program. And again, running a report on completion is much easier than measuring behaviors or calculating a human risk score.
What's the risk of continuing to report cosmetic metrics without meaningful behavioral data?
Well, the problem of this is that if we focus on getting to that 100% completion rate and reporting only on this, we might create a false sense of security. It doesn't tell the full story, obviously, to report on compliance, on completion rates. And actually, I would even say it doesn't tell much except for proving compliance. So that creates mostly this false sense of security. And it's not only completion rate. I would say that what I hear regularly is that a lot of organizations seem to be obsessed with click rate on their phishing simulation. So completion rate is one, but the other one, the biggest one that is being reported on, is click rate.
So if completion doesn't tell the full story, what does? What should security leaders be tracking instead?
Well, coming back from the Sun Summit, I've heard actually a lot of stories from people there, from speakers who took the stage and shared about how they built more advanced reporting, more advanced metrics for their security awareness, behavior, and culture programs. So, for example, there were quite a few people who had built dashboards and scorecards that included more than this completion or click rate. For example, there was Rocket. It's one of the largest mortgage lenders in the US. And what they showed on stage is that they created a sort of scorecard that they share with all of their employees. That includes their full performance on phishing simulations, if they reported, clicked, missed. Also on MFA prompt simulations. So they do these prompts in Duo to see if people would click on an unexpected MFA prompt. And they also do password guessing, so to see if people have weak passwords. And that's also part of the dashboard. So it's really cool because it gives some visibility and transparency to the employees. And that was their main point in how we can bring that visibility, that transparency to make people more motivated about it. And it created really a healthy competition there where the employees, when they saw their score compared to the average score of the company, the best score in the company, the worst score in the company, they can see where they are and they might want more. And actually, they share with the team at Rocket that some people ask for even more phishing simulations in order to improve their score. That's also what we experience at Hoxhunt with the gamification and that transparency, that feedback that we give in a non-judgmental way to employees. But still, that is very focused on the security awareness activities, right? On more of the training and engagement type of metrics. There were others who have shared that they collected a bit more. I would say that the majority of teams and people who were at the event focused on the engagement, awareness, training metrics, going further than completion rate and click rate, but still focused on that part. But there were a few, like Equinix, for example, they had a workshop about how to build your security dashboard. And they showed how they build those dashboards, including not only awareness and engagement metrics, but, for example, their security incident data. They have a classification of incidents and some incidents that have a human element in them, and they track this data and categorize this data and look at the trends over time, as well as other specific employee behaviors. So long story short, right, we can go further. We need to track more than completion rate. We can track more awareness engagement metrics, but we can go even further and track behaviors and incidents. And that's what matters the most, I think.
It sounds like Rocket and Equinix really get it there. That's a really interesting approach that Equinix is doing. It sounds a lot like the evolving human risk management category approach to tracking both awareness and training metrics and combining those with actual behaviors and actual incidents like that, and seeing how one can influence the other and how improving one can improve the other. So that's must have been a really interesting talk that you saw there.
It was, and as you say, that's what I would call human risk management, also getting that behavior and risk data. And more organizations are doing it. I would say still maybe 20% of organizations out there who are the most mature, and some of them are creating their own dashboards, and some of them are buying the solution from vendors like Hoxhunt and Equinix actually said that they built their dashboard for a couple of years and it was a great experience, but now that they decided to go to the buy versus build route, they decided to buy something.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Have you seen teams combine quantitative and qualitative data to paint a more complete picture of human risk? How do we measure culture shifts and behavior beyond hard numbers?
Yeah, so again, behaviors, incidents, really great metrics to track that are better than completion rates, in my opinion. But we might want also to look at some, you mentioned qualitative data also to paint a more complete picture of human risk. And surveys and focus groups can help, for example, to measure culture and attitudes, behaviors in one part. But if you want to measure also how people feel about security, what they think of the security team, if they feel psychologically safe, you can combine those different things. Surveys and focus group survey results are quantitative, so you can actually enter that into the dashboard and compare it with actual behavior data. But even for the fully qualitative type of data that you could get from talking to people, from doing those focus groups, it's helpful because it helps understand the hard metrics and understand why people, why you get those metrics, why people do the things that they do. For example, if the report rates are low in the company and you don't understand why, the surveys, the focus groups may reveal that employees don't feel psychologically safe about reporting.
So how do you actually measure behavior change in a way that doesn't get dismissed as soft or anecdotal?
Well, behavior is anything but soft, right? Behavior is an action. It's visible. It's hard metrics. And a lot of fields aim at changing behaviors and have experience on this. We talked about, smoking and broccoli, and public health is really a great example of that, where they have done lots of research and they have lots of experience into how can we help the general public to be a little bit healthier, to do the right thing for their health. We have also road safety, for example, putting the seatbelt when you get into the car. And what they did in these sectors is that, apart from the research, what they do and when they want to create a behavior, it's a very scientific approach, I would say. They assess what the risk is, and they make an hypothesis as to, they look at these are the behaviors we want to change, and they make an hypothesis as to what would change them. So they design, a couple of or more, a series of behavioral interventions, and see if they work, measure the behavior before, measure the behavior after the experiment to see if the experiment is working, if the behavior intervention that they designed is actually changing behaviors. Let me give you an example on this. I was at another conference in France a couple of months back, and there was this person who reported about a campaign that they did or experiments that they did to have the kids taking school buses put on their seatbelt in the bus when they go to school and back home. And a lot of kids were not. A lot of kids were, it's a bus, in the bus, do you really need to wear the seatbelt? It's cooler not to wear the seatbelt, maybe. So they knew they had a problem here. They knew which behavior they wanted to change. It was kids should put on their seatbelt when they get into the school bus. And so they created a lot of different interventions. They tried to have posters. They tried actually to change what's on the seat and make like a very graphic comic book style type of design on the seat where it really showed, the click of putting your seatbelt. They tried the sound also, like the click of the seatbelt to try to make it more fun. They had also recording of that would go when people arrive in the bus that said, why they should put their seatbelt, and as a reminder, instead of having the driver say that, because the drivers didn't really want to say it anymore because they felt not respected, maybe saying that and not having it done, so they wouldn't even say it anymore. So they had the audio recording, and they tried a lot of different things, and they didn't apply the same experiments in the same buses, but they had people go measure, that was the behavior before. In this bus, we tried the poster. In that bus, we tried the recording. In that other bus, we tried the fun new surface for the seats. And they looked at what worked the best, right? And they did manage, by combining the interventions that worked the most, to really change the behaviors there and to have 50% more kids put on their seatbelt after these interventions.
That's really something.
Yeah, and that's, of course, that takes time, right? You do need to try different things, and there might be some things that you try that don't work. But in cybersecurity, we need to learn from these fields. We need to learn from public safety, public health, from safety, and experiment and measure. Experiment and measure, to me, is our absolutely best leverage to change behaviors.
What a cool story. Yeah, absolutely. That really ties in. What early indicators suggest a shift in behavior even before the full metrics materialize?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think behavior change takes time, right? You're not going to get your all organizations to adopt all the security behaviors that you want within a month, right? It's a matter of years. But what you can see quite quickly, I think, and is the way how people talk about security. Maybe discussions that you overhear in the office, discussions next to the coffee machine, to the water cooler, and how people talk about security, or the fact that more people reach out to you with questions and concerns about security. Those start to show a change of attitudes towards security, and that change of attitudes typically precedes long-lasting change in behaviors. Also, the increase in reporting of incidents, right? If more people report incidents, that's also a great indicator that there will be further behavior change. Even if you get a lot of false positives in the beginning, in the beginning it's going to be more incidents being reported. So you feel like, okay, what's happening? Why do we have more incidents than before? But it's because they're being reported more often. There might be some false positive, but with time.
Are there any signals such as simulation reporting, response times, etc., that better reflect actual risk reduction?
Yeah, so I did mention that we want to measure behaviors. We want to measure also the incidents, but on the incident side, it's a little bit difficult because typically it increases before it actually decreases because of increased reporting. But one of the things that you can check quite easily, instead of looking at the click rate only, is on phishing simulations, looking at how fast people report the simulations. And not only how fast they report the simulations, but how fast they report real threats. The dwell time for the attackers, right? How long they have between they send the campaign and someone first reports that campaign. So that's a great way to measure. That's quite easy to measure with most of the solutions. We can measure that in Hoxhunt, and that really helps you to see, if people are reporting real incidents faster, phishing threats faster, then you'll start get that information faster and can take action before something bad happens. So that's an example of a great measure of actual risk reduction.
Let's shift gears a little bit and talking about moving beyond compliance and the importance of internal buy-in. And that's even an open question there, is how important is internal buy-in for moving beyond compliance? So What are the most common objections from leadership when you try to move beyond compliance metrics?
It's a great question because that's a very common challenge that I've heard organizations facing when they want to go beyond compliance. So the first objection or the first challenge is one of continuity. Like if we've reported on completion rates or on click rates forever, like how do we compare what we are doing now if we change the way we report, right? And that can be tricky. The thing is that we need to find ways to continue to be able to compare while also understanding that if we change the way we do things, yes, the reporting is going to change. We're not going to report on the same exact things, and that's a good thing. The other objection could be one of complexity. Like if you want to give a better picture of human risk, you might want to share several metrics instead of just one. So not just completion rate, again, not just click rate, but sharing a mix of different behavior metrics, because we've not devised yet, I would say, the perfect single human risk indicator that would be a mix of that. And I've seen some organizations try. Also, I've done a lot of things on this in Hoxhunt, but yeah, it's going to be an indicator mixing a lot of different things. It's a great way to follow, but it's also not, you don't see inside what is actually going up and going down if you mix everything into an average. So the complexity can be also a challenge.
So how do you make the case internally that behavioral metrics are not just nice to have, but that they're actually necessary?
First, we need to frame it as, what we're looking for is risk reduction. Again, compliance, it's important. Say that you'll continue to make sure to be compliant, right? That's part of the role. That's part of what we need to do. We'll continue to make sure to be compliant. But the goal of a wellness behavior culture, human risk manager, is also to enable the organization strategy while reducing the human cybersecurity risk. So for example, if the business strategy of the company includes using AI to increase productivity, that's quite common, I would say, nowadays, that all companies want to use AI and that they put that in part of the strategy. You can say that your goal is to enable the increased usage of AI tool for better productivity, but a safe usage of these tools. And executives, I would say, care about that. They care about achieving these business outcomes while reducing the business risk. So you need to kind of change your positioning in the organization and the positioning of your team, possibly. Compliance is one part, doing training is one part, but that's not your goal. Your goal is to enable the organization strategy by reducing the human risk in cybersecurity.
What's worked in getting buy-in from risk audit or legal teams that are stuck on completion numbers? When you talk to execs, what kind of human risk metrics actually make them pay attention?
I think the best way is always to show the results, right? Because you can talk for hours about why we should do it. Like, it's for risk reduction and 90% of cybersecurity incidents have a human element or extra. But the best way to get buy-in is always to show results. So if you can try, one or several smaller experiments and show that they led to behavior change and to reduce risk, that's what's going to bring you the most. For example, following your actions, if you're able to say we cut phishing dwell time from 7 to 2 hours to 12 hours on average, or employees now report 4 times more threats than before. So share this, and I've seen it work really well from my own experience. When I changed a phishing provider in the past, in one of my previous organizations, I initially didn't deploy the new solution to everyone. I deployed it to a test group, and I said, it's opt-in, you can join and try this enhanced phishing simulation program. And after 6 months, I did a test where I sent the same phishing email or phishing simulation to everyone. People who were in that experiment and people who were on the normal program that we had run for years before, very standard compliance-based one. And what happened is that people were in the enhanced phishing training program. They were, if I remember correctly, 6 times less likely to click and 7 times more likely to report that phishing simulation that we sent. So we could really show that, yes, we've made an impact. This intervention that we've designed is working great. People are 6 times less likely to click, 7 times more likely to report. So let's deploy it to everyone now. And when I say that it worked, right, and that it really helped me to get buy-in, I'm saying this because I shared that to my CISO, and the CISO said, that's great, let's show it to the CTO. And the CTO said, that's great, let's show it to the C-suite. And I found myself in front of the C-suite explaining that experiment, explaining how we reduced the risk and what we were going to do next, and that we needed their buy-in and their support for it. That has been really helpful. So I always encourage people to experiment, measure, show the proof of your impact.
That's a great result, and that's a great story about how you can actually make the metrics tell a story that goes all the way up the chain. Fantastic stuff. And looking at on the other end of that, though, going back to completion rates. So do completion rates, which are not quite so indicative of actual progress in a program reducing risk, do completion rates, their stats, ever get used to justify a program that isn't actually working? And how should teams challenge that framing?
Yeah, it's being used, of course, because it's being used as a way to prove I've done my work, right? I've done everything I should do. I made sure that 100% of people have completed the training, right? And it takes work to do that. It takes time because there's always a few people who resist, right? So that's a completion is a proof of activity, right? And some people use that to say that I worked well and we're compliant, but it's not an outcome. Right? It's not, again, showing what's the impact of the completion. So I think as a team, you can challenge that by thinking about, okay, did this completion rate, is it actually reducing the number of incidents or reducing the human risk? Can I see that reduction in incidents or risk from that completion rate? Right? If not, then it's not the right metric, right? If your goal is to reach compliance, then that's and your only goal and primary goal, then that's great. If your primary goal is to reduce the human risk in cybersecurity, then you need a different set of metrics.
Well, if you had to pick one metric that gets overused or misinterpreted in awareness programs, what would it be? And what would you replace it with?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned it before, it's the click rate. I think it's overused even more than completion rate in my conversations with people. And a lot of security awareness practitioners are frustrated about it. And believe me, they know it's not the best metric and they would like to change, but they face resistance from their management. But click rate alone, it's misleading, right? It's very easy to manipulate by changing the difficulty of the campaigns. It will never go down to 0, and it focuses on failure, not on what people need to do, but how people fail. And I think that creates a terrible culture in the organization where we focus on how people fail and punish them with more training. So we should replace that with, when it comes to phishing, with better metrics like reporting rate, which is the positive action. When you receive something suspicious, you report it to security, or report of real threats, or the time to report, the dwell time that we mentioned before.
Let's shift gears a little bit and discuss tactical shifts in measurement. What's the role of just-in-time training or real-time behavioral feedback in making measurement more meaningful?
I think what's the role of just-in-time training and real-time feedback is it makes the behavior that we want easier. It makes learning stick because it's contextual. When you receive something at the moment where you're facing a potential risk, right, at the moment of a potential mistake, it's much better to get a nudge at this moment that tells you, this is maybe not what you want to do, but have you thought about this? Or this is the solution that you should use in our company. It's far more effective than doing that 6 months before or 6 months later, right? When no one will remember when it matters. So we want to send this information also at the right moment. Doing it in a short way, just in time, is much more likely to change the behavior than doing a training for everyone once a year.
Yeah, absolutely. The right training at the right time to the right person. So important. Do you think training frequency is overvalued compared to timing or relevance? And how should that shift how we measure success? How should orgs think about the minimum effective dose, so to speak, of training, especially when under pressure to do more?
It's a great question, or lots of questions, but the uh, you said, do you think that training frequency is overvalued compared to timing or relevance? And I think still a large number of organizations don't train frequently enough. We have a large number of organizations that would do something just once a year or once a quarter instead of having a more continuous approach. So overall, I don't think it's overvalued, and I think we need to remember to have continuous approach to security awareness and training. It's not just one awareness e-learning or the cybersecurity awareness month in October. But I've also seen horrible things happen in some organizations when security teams made the move from something yearly to something maybe monthly, but they kept the same length of duration of training. So maybe they would do something every month, but of 30 minutes every month. A 30-minute e-learning package to all employees to do every month. And obviously that's very annoying for the employees, creates a lot of frustration. They don't have time for 30 minutes of security per month, every month for 12 months. So doing things continuous is very important, but it's also important that when we do that, when we send things more frequently, that we also make sure that it's also shorter and more relevant.
You talked earlier about when you had those amazing results from an experiment, and the results were put up the chain all the way up to very high levels of the organization. When you present behavioral data to the board or the risk committee, such as that, how do you make it land, especially when they're used to, well, let's say completion stats?
I'm not going to say it's easy. It's an acquired skill. And I would say first, ask for help. Ask for help from, your own managers or people who, in the organization have already done presentations to the board or risk committee. I've spent more time with them to know what they care about. Because what you need to present is what they care about, right? Not what you care about, but what they care about, and make sure that they listen to you. And that means making sure to frame things based on their challenges. That means using their language also. So be careful of the language that you use, not too technical cybersecurity or language, of course, but more business language. And then using a combination of the data that proves your point and the stories. And it should probably never be fully data or fully stories. You want a good mix of that, of the figures and telling a story about the figures, right? And telling about incidents that have happened in your organization or in similar organizations to yours, so that the message resonates, instead of just saying that X% of organizations have been, under this type of threat, DDoS threat in the past 12 months. If you, instead of that, tell a story about, okay, our competitor, they actually, in March of last year, they got under a DDoS attack and their stores were closed for 3 full days, and that caused business loss of a revenue loss of X million, right? That's much more powerful instead of saying like this global statistic.
The team is still clinging to completion rates despite all of your efforts to educate them and to illuminate them. If they're so clinging to completion rates as their primary success metric, what would you challenge them to ask themselves?
Maybe I would ask them, I would ask it the other way around. Like, if you wouldn't reach 100% completion rate, what would happen? What's the worst that could happen? Would the cybersecurity risk actually increase? Not the legal risk, I understand the compliance part, but the cybersecurity one.
Are you seeing a shift in maturity across the industry where teams are moving away from vanity metrics, or is that still a niche?
I think there's movement for sure. Again, coming back to Sun, so I was here this year, but I was there also last year and the year before. And from one year to the other, I can see that there's more and more people, more and more organizations who are looking into expanding their set of metrics, who are looking into what's the data that we can get and how can we visualize it, how can we report it to stakeholders. Strangely, I think there were actually a bit more last year in 2024 than in 2025. There were a bit more talks about metrics last time than this time. But last year was the first time that I had seen so many. It was like huge compared to all the previous ones. That so many people would focus on the metrics and the dashboard and the risk scores and human risk management, basically. And so the movement is definitely underway. I shared before the fact that it's maybe 20% of the most mature organizations today, but it is growing. And analyst firms are also talking about this. Gartner, the Forrester, they're also telling that this is the direction where teams need to go towards, right? So all of this to say that basically, as the saying goes, the best time to start doing this was yesterday, but the next best time is today.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about storytelling and the way that you could potentially tell stories to really effectively have those metrics get the impact they really deserve. I was just talking to someone else who had his whole career as a CISO in Fortune 500 companies and as a state CISO in the United States at Microsoft now. And he was talking about how he would go before boards and he would see other people go before the boards and trying to tell them all these metrics that were isolated, and they were very impressive if you were very technical, if you're in cybersecurity, but they really meant nothing to the board or to the executive themselves until it was made relevant to the audience. And one of the ways that he talked about that was he had a conversation with someone in the senior management team, and they'd actually come to him and said, "Hey, I really, until I had this training where I really had to focus on recognizing and reporting this social engineering attack, I'm pretty sure I would have clicked this." And he just told that simple story, just someone else having had this experience. And they kind of laughed about it and talked about like the way that these phishing attacks can come in and how some of them look so silly, but how the fact that this person who was in a very important position with the company was then in a place where he felt educated, and he said, like, I would have clicked on this if I had gone through this intensive training that you put me into. So talking about storytelling, there's all kinds of storytelling, and I'm wondering if you, with all of your experiences, have ever had an experience like that where you had a result, you had that 6x, that 7x improvement in reporting rates. Did you ever have a chance to use some kind of a story where you could really make those metrics sing, really make them land a little harder with your audience?
I think what you just explained is a great story in itself, because I think what made it work is that it's relatable, right? When he shared that thing that, okay, if I hadn't done this training, I would have probably clicked. Maybe the people in front were like, yeah, I would also have probably clicked. I shouldn't say it, but yeah, probably. So you need to make things relatable. And as much as I'm an engineer and I love numbers, but I also know that as humans, we struggle with numbers overall and statistics. They don't make so much sense to our brains, while a story is something that we've always understood and that can inspire people because it's relatable. It's something that you feel for. It creates emotions. So to come back to your question and about when I shared that story to actually the C-suite and the board with the 6 times reduction in click and 7 times improvement in report, the whole thing is shared as a story because I said, like, this was the problem that we had. These were incidents that we received. We lost that amount of money before because of it. And kind of going through about, okay, so we explore things, we try this, it works well, and now this is what people say about it also, and having quotes from people, right? Just as simple as that, and saying what people say about it. Because then you combine again the metrics saying that, yeah, prove that it works, but also what people say about it, just that it was fun, I learned a lot, I want more phishing simulations. Without that, I would have clicked. So adding quotes about what people say. So talk to people all the time. Get and write down what they say about security, about your program. That's helpful to find out what are the pain points, and what you need to work on. And if they say great things, you can also share that.
What a great point, too. One of my favorite case studies I've done was when I spoke with Martin Stiles from Bird & Bird, a global law firm headquartered in London. And when I asked him what his favorite statistic was, his favorite metric to report, he said, actually, my favorite metric is that people love this program. People love Hoxhunt. He goes to the board and he'll like quote people. He'll just tell them that people who are going on maternity leave are afraid to go on maternity leave, not for the job security, because they might miss a simulation. And other people will come to him saying, can they get more Hoxhunt training? Can they get this kind of stuff? And that showed this big shift in culture around the fact that people are actually embracing cybersecurity, likely for the first time for many of them. So that's an awesome point, is that in addition to metrics, you can kind of take the pulse of the company and get a couple of really choice testimonials to let everybody know that people enjoy this and create that feedback loop.
Yeah, that's exactly that.
Great. All right, Maxime. Well, I very much appreciate your time today. This has been great. This has been very informative. Enjoy the rest of your time over in the United States. And I look forward to talking to you more about all the learnings you had from the SON Security Summit.
Yeah, great talking to you, Eliot, today. Have a good day, everyone.